The XLR Empire's fleet floated in the cold, dark space near the border of their territory. The massive warships, covered in glowing blue lights, moved slowly as they scanned the area for any threats. It was supposed to be a quiet patrol, just like every other day. Commander Vroth sat on his throne-like chair in the center of the control room. His yellow eyes scanned the large screen in front of him. Everything seemed normal. No enemy ships, no danger, just empty space. Then suddenly, alarms started blaring. The red warning lights flashed across the control room. The giant screen in front of Vroth changed. A message appeared in bold letters. Critical ALERT. Unknown warship detected. The XLR officers jumped from their seats. Their long, clawed fingers tapped furiously on their control panels. Numbers and codes flashed on the screens, but nothing made sense. Vroth's heart pounded. What ship? Where? He demanded. One of his officers, a younger XLR named Rithan, checked his monitor. His voice trembled as he spoke. Commander, it's a human ship. Silence filled the control room. Every officer froze. The only sound was the low hum of the ship's engine. Vroth's claws tightened around the arms of his chair. Are you sure? His voice was a low growl. Rithan gulped. Yes, sir. The ship matches human design. And it's massive. The large screen zoomed in on the mysterious ship. It was a dark, terrifying war vessel, almost double the size of any XLR cruiser. Its thick armor was covered in scars, burn marks, cracks, and deep cuts, as if it had survived 100 battles. The ship had no bright lights, no fancy designs. It was built for one thing: war. Then, the ship's name appeared on the scanner. The words sent a chill down every XLR spine. HFY. An older officer gasped. That's impossible. That ship was destroyed years ago. Vroth's mind raced. He remembered the stories. The HSS Vengeance was one of the most feared human warships. It had vanished after the last war between humans and the XLR. Everyone believed it was gone forever. But now, here it was, right at their doorstep. The ship was not moving. It just floated in space, silent and still, like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. Vroth stood up. Send a message, he ordered. Tell them to identify themselves. Rithan nodded and pressed a button. A deep, mechanical voice echoed through the control room. Unidentified human warship, you have entered XLR space. Identify yourself immediately, or we will open fire. The officers waited. Seconds passed. Then a full minute, but there was no response. The HSS Vengeance remained silent. This is bad, one officer whispered. This is very bad. Vroth's eyes narrowed. Prepare for battle. The XLR warships moved into attack formation, surrounding the human vessel from all sides. Their weapons glowed, ready to fire at any moment. But still, the human warship did nothing. No movement, no signs of life. One officer gulped. Maybe there's no one inside. Vroth shook his head. He knew humans. They were never this quiet. They were warriors, fighters, survivors. Then, without warning, the HSS Vengeance came to life. Its engines roared, lighting up with a blinding red glow. The ship's front slowly turned toward the XLR fleet, like a beast waking up from a deep sleep. Vroth's claws dug into his chair. All ships, hold position, he barked. The tension was unbearable. The XLR officers held their breath as the massive human warship aimed directly at them. Then, before anyone could react, boom! A powerful energy blast erupted from HSS Vengeance, striking one of the XLR warships. The explosion was so massive that the ship was vaporized instantly. The control room shook. Officers fell to the floor. Sparks flew from the monitors. We are under attack. Someone screamed. Vroth's eyes burned with rage and fear. Fire back. fire HFY thing. But deep inside, he knew the truth. The HFY were not hunting the humans today. The humans had come for them. The HFY warship trembled from the shock of the explosion. Smoke filled the control room, and alarms screamed in every direction. Commander Vroth's sharp claws gripped the armrest of his chair as he watched the burning remains of one of his best warships. Destroyed. In one shot. The HSS Vengeance had barely moved, yet it had wiped out an entire cruiser in seconds. Vroth could hear the panicked whispers of his officers. They took down a warship like it was nothing. How did they do that? This isn't possible. Vroth's yellow eyes narrowed. His officers were afraid, and fear was dangerous. He had seen warriors hesitate in battle before, and hesitation meant death. He had to keep control. Silence, he barked, his deep voice cutting through the chaos. We are the HFY. We do not fear a single human ship. But deep inside, he knew that was a lie. Every species in the galaxy feared humans. They were different, unpredictable. Unlike other races, they thrived in war. Where most civilizations sought peace, humans saw war as a challenge. Where others surrendered when outnumbered, humans fought harder. And worst of all, they never gave up. Vroth turned to his officers. Tell me, what do we know about this ship? One of the senior officers, an old veteran named Korak, stepped forward. His scales were pale from age, and his voice was slow but firm. Commander, this is HSS Vengeance. It was last seen in the war between humans and the HFY nearly 20 years ago. The last report said it was destroyed, but clearly that was wrong. Why do humans name their ships like this? Rithan, the young officer, asked. Vengeance, it sounds so. Dangerous, Korak finished. Yes, humans do not name their ships for decoration. They name them for a purpose. Vengeance means revenge. It means someone has returned to settle a score. A heavy silence fell over the room. Vroth's mind raced. The HFY Empire had won the last war, barely. Humanity had retreated after suffering terrible losses. But that war had been long, brutal, and costly. The humans had almost won. If they had one more year, one more fleet, they might have crushed the HFY. And now, after all these years, a human warship had returned. Why now? Vroth muttered. What do they want? Korak's eyes darkened. Perhaps the better question is, what are they willing to do to get it? The legends of human warfare. The younger officers had never fought humans before, but the veterans had. Korak was one of them. His voice was low as he spoke. Humans do not fight like other species. They are strange. Rithan frowned. Strange how? Korak's claws tapped against the metal console. They fight even when they know they will lose. When the Grax Empire attacked them, their fleets were outnumbered 10-1. But instead of running, the humans lured the Grax into a trap and destroyed their entire armada. Another officer spoke up. I heard a human ship once self-destructed inside a HFY capital ship, killing 500,000 of our troops. A third officer added, they fight with no fear, no mercy. I heard humans even modify their own bodies to become better killers. Vroth listened to every word, his mind racing. Humans were not like the HFY. They did not fight for honor, for land, or for resources. They fought for survival. They fought like demons. The growing fear. The officers turned back to the screen. The HSS Vengeance was still floating in the darkness, silent, waiting. They could have fired again, Korak muttered. But they didn't. Why? They are watching us, Vroth said, studying our reaction. The realization made his scales crawl. The humans were testing them. Commander, Rithan said quietly, do we have a chance? Vroth looked around the room. Fear was spreading fast. He had to do something before it was too late. Humans are dangerous, he admitted, but they are not invincible. He turned to his weapons officer. Prepare the fleet. We will not run. We will not show weakness. But deep down, for the first time in his life, Commander Vroth was afraid. The war was not over. It had just begun. The XLR fleet floated in space, surrounding the HSS Vengeance like a pack of hunters stalking the wounded beast. But Vroth knew the truth. The humans were never the prey. The control room of the XLR flagship was tense. Officers stared at their screens, waiting for any movement from the human warship. The silence was unbearable. Every second felt like an hour. Then Vroth made his decision. "Send a message," he ordered. "One last warning." The communications officer pressed a button. His voice, sharp and commanding, echoed through the speakers. "Unidentified human warship, you have entered XLR space. Surrender immediately, or we will open fire." Everyone waited. No response. The HSS Vengeance remained motionless, like a dead thing drifting through space. But Vroth wasn't fooled. "This is a trap," he muttered. "They are testing our patience." The silence stretched longer. Then, suddenly, the human ship moved. The Vengeance awakens. The massive warship tilted slightly, its front turning toward the XLR fleet. Its engines flared up with a deep red glow. The hum of its power reactors rumbled through space like the growl of an awakened beast. The officers on Vroth's ship panicked. "It's locking weapons. They are targeting us." Vroth's eyes burned with rage. "Enough waiting. Fire HFY thing." The XLR fleet unleashed a storm of energy blasts. Bright blue beams shot across the darkness, racing toward the human warship. Missiles followed, leaving glowing trails behind them. The vacuum of space lit up like a deadly fireworks display. Then something terrifying happened. SS Vengeance did not move. It did not dodge. It did not activate its shields. It let the attacks hit. Explosions covered the human warship. Fire and smoke erupted from its hull. The XLR officers cheered. "We got them. They're finished." But Vroth did not celebrate. He stared at the burning ship, his instincts screaming. Something was wrong. Then, through the fire and smoke, SS Vengeance emerged, completely unharmed. The XLR cheers died in an instant. The counterattack. Before anyone could react, the human ship fired. Boom! A massive energy blast, 10 times stronger than anything the XLR had, shot forward. It struck one of the XLR destroyers directly in the center. The ship exploded instantly. There was no time for screams, no chance for escape. 1 second, the warship was there. The next, it was gone. The control room shook from the force of the blast. Sparks flew from the ceiling. Officers fell from their seats. "What was that?" An officer screamed. "Their weapons are too powerful." Another yelled. Vroth's claws dug into his chair. "No, their technology is too advanced." The humans had improved. Their weapons were stronger. Their armor was tougher. And they weren't holding back anymore. Chaos in the fleet. Panic spread through the XLR ranks. Some ships turned, trying to escape. Others fired wildly in every direction. Then, the HSS Vengeance moved at full speed. For a ship that large, it should have been slow. But it wasn't. It cut through space like a predator hunting its prey. It fired again. Another XLR warship exploded. Then another. The XLR fleet was falling apart. "We need to retreat," an officer shouted. "No," Vroth roared. "Hold the line." But it was useless. The fleet was breaking. Fear had taken over. The message from the humans. Then, for the first time, the human warship sent a transmission. A deep, robotic voice echoed through every XLR ship. "To the XLR Empire, your time is over. You thought humanity was gone. You were wrong. We have returned, and we bring vengeance." A chill ran through Vroth's body. The humans weren't just here for a battle. They were here for war. The beginning of the end. The HSS Vengeance charged forward, cutting through the fleet like a storm. Vroth clenched his fists. He had to do something, anything, to stop this. But deep down, for the first time in his life, he understood something terrifying. The Acceleri were no longer the hunters. They were the hunted. The darkness of space burned with explosions. The Acceleri fleet, once proud and powerful, was now in complete chaos. Ships turned and twisted, trying to escape the HSS Vengeance, but the human warship was like a predator tearing through its prey. Commander Vroth stood frozen, watching his fleet collapse. His officers shouted in panic. 2 more ships down. Our weapons are useless. We can't win this. Vroth's claws dug into his armrest. His mind raced. This was impossible. The humans were supposed to be gone. Defeated. Weak. But here they were, stronger than ever. The monster in the dark. The HSS Vengeance moved through space with terrifying speed. Its hull, covered in battle scars, absorbed attack after attack without slowing down. One Acceleri warship, desperate to stop it, launched all its missiles at once. 20 warheads raced toward the human ship, glowing bright blue. For a moment, hope flickered in the Acceleri control room. Then, something terrifying happened. The human warship activated countermeasures. A wave of red energy pulsed from its hull. The missiles, instead of exploding on impact, froze in place. Their engines died. Their lights faded. Then, boom. The missiles exploded before reaching their target, destroyed by the human ship's defense systems. The Acceleri officers watched in horror. They disabled our weapons without even moving. A cold chill ran through Vroth's body. The humans were far beyond anything that Acceleri had ever seen, and they were just getting started. Desperation. Fall back. Vroth roared. All ships, fall back. But it was too late. The HSS Vengeance opened fire again. Its weapons were unlike anything the Acceleri had ever faced. A red beam of energy sliced through the battlefield, tearing the Acceleri battleship in half. The 2 pieces spun into the void, burning. Smaller human drones, dark, ghostly machines with glowing red eyes, launched from the warship's hangars. They moved like shadows, too fast to target, ripping through the Acceleri defenses with deadly precision. One Acceleri officer screamed, "We're being overrun." Another shouted, "There's no way to win. The humans are too strong." Vroth's chest burned with frustration. His entire fleet, one of the strongest in the Acceleri Empire, was being hunted like animals. And the humans, they weren't even struggling. The turning point. Vroth refused to die like this. He slammed his fist against the console. "Target their engines," he commanded. "If we can't destroy them, we disable them." The remaining Acceleri warships adjusted their aim. Energy cannons charged up. This was their last chance. A barrage of focused plasma beams shot toward the HSS Vengeance's engines. For the first time in the battle, the human warship reacted. It twisted, dodging most of the shots, but one beam struck its side. Sparks exploded. Smoke poured from the impact zone. "Direct hit," an officer cheered. But the celebration was short-lived, because the ship didn't stop. Instead, it turned toward the Acceleri flagship. Vroth's blood ran cold. The humans were coming for him. The death march. The HSS Vengeance powered forward. It wasn't retreating. It wasn't stopping. It was charging straight into the heart of the Acceleri fleet. Braced for impact. Someone shouted. Then, boom. The human warship smashed through a Acceleri frigate, tearing it apart like paper. Fire and debris scattered in every direction. The ship didn't even slow down. It wanted to get close. It wanted to face them head-on. Vroth's heart pounded. How? How are they this strong? The final blow. The human warship's front cannons began to glow. A massive energy buildup crackled along its hull. The ship was preparing to fire its strongest weapon yet. Vroth knew what was coming. A doomsday shot. If they didn't stop it, his entire fleet would be gone in seconds. HFY Story, he roared. All ships, move. But it was too late. The HSS Vengeance fired. A red wave of destruction erupted from its front cannons, spreading across space like a storm. Every Cellary warship in its path was engulfed in fire. Boom, boom, boom. One after another, the Cellary warships vanished in fire and light. Survivors. When the explosion cleared, only 2 Cellary ships remained. Vroth's flagship and a single damaged cruiser. The battlefield was silent. The Cellary fleet, once powerful, was now dust floating in space. Vroth fell back into his chair, his mind blank. This was not war. This was a massacre. And the humans had won. The aftermath. A final message came from the HSS Vengeance. This is only the beginning. We are coming for all of you. Then, without a word, the human warship turned and disappeared into the void, leaving behind the wreckage of the worst defeat in Cellary history. And in that moment, Vroth understood something terrible. The humans were not just back. They were angry. And the war had only begun. The wreckage of the Cellary fleet drifted in the cold emptiness of space. Fires still burned on shattered hulls, and frozen bodies floated like silent ghosts. Inside the last surviving Cellary cruiser, Commander Vroth stood motionless, staring at the devastation. His once mighty fleet was gone, destroyed, and the HSS Vengeance had disappeared into the void. But it had left something behind. A distress beacon, a silent message from the humans, a challenge. Vroth's sharp claws clenched. They want us to come to them. His officers exchanged nervous glances. Commander, you don't mean. Vroth turned to his crew, his yellow eyes burning. We are not running. We will board that ship. We will see what these humans have become. The mission begins. A small strike team was chosen. Vroth and 5 of his best warriors. They entered a stealth pod and launched toward the human ship's last known location. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then, out of the darkness, the HSS Vengeance appeared, like a nightmare returning. Its massive black hull floated silently, covered in battle scars. The ship looked ancient, yet powerful, deadly. Vroth's heart pounded. Prepare for entry. The Cellary pod attached itself to the human ship's airlock. Sparks flew as the warriors cut through the metal door. Then, with a loud hiss, the entrance opened. And for the first time in 20 years, a Cellary warrior stepped inside a human warship. The silent horror. The hallway was dark, silent, cold. Vroth's team moved carefully, their weapons ready. Their footsteps echoed through the metallic corridors. Something felt wrong. One of the warriors whispered, "Where are the humans?" Vroth scanned the area. The ship's systems were active. Lights flickered, computers hummed, doors powered on. But there were no crew members, no guards, no voices, nothing. It was as if the ship was empty. The first discovery. As they moved deeper inside, the Cellary found something strange. A row of human armor suits lined the walls. They were massive, dark, and reinforced with unknown metal. One of the warriors, Korak, touched the armor. This is not like before. These are not normal soldiers. Then, suddenly, the armor moved. Korak barely had time to react before a giant metal hand grabbed his throat. Crack! Korak's body fell lifeless to the ground. The armor suit stepped forward. Its visor glowed red. And then, a voice came from inside the suit. Deep, mechanical, inhuman. You should not have come here. The super soldiers. The Cellary opened fire. Energy blasts lit up the dark hallway, hitting the armored figure. But it didn't fall. It didn't even flinch. The armored human raised its weapon, a massive energy rifle. Boom! A single shot tore through another Celery warrior, blasting him in half. Vroth's mind raced. This wasn't a normal human. This was something else. A new kind of soldier. A warrior modified beyond recognition. A machine of war. Fall back! Vroth shouted. The Celery turned and ran, but the armored figure followed. More red lights appeared in the darkness. More super soldiers stepped out of the shadows. One by one, the Celery warriors fell, until only Vroth remained. The truth of the vengeance. Vroth's breathing was heavy. He stood in a massive chamber surrounded by dozens of armored humans. Then, from the shadows, a new figure emerged. Not a soldier. A human commander. His face was pale, scared, his eyes burning with something darker than hatred. Vroth met his gaze and finally understood. This was not just a warship. This was a tomb. A relic from the past, filled with warriors who had died once and been reborn as something worse. The human commander stepped forward and whispered, "Welcome to the end of your empire." And then, everything went black. Commander Vroth's vision blurred as he slowly regained consciousness. His body ached, and his head pounded like a war drum. Cold metal pressed against his back. He was still alive. He tried to move, but his arms were chained. His sharp claws scraped against the cuffs, but they wouldn't break. Then he heard it. The sound of footsteps. Heavy, mechanical, relentless. Vroth looked up. The human commander stood before him. His face was pale, his eyes filled with something darker than hatred. He was not just a soldier, he was something else. A ghost of a war long thought finished. "You should have stayed away," the human said, his voice deep, emotionless. "But now you will understand." Vroth growled. "Understand what?" The human stepped aside, revealing something terrifying. Rows of metal pods lined the room, each filled with humans in stasis. Their bodies were wrapped in wires, their eyes shut, their faces frozen in pain. This was not a ship. This was a graveyard. A voice echoed from the ship's speakers. Protocol reactivation. Complete. War mode. Active. The HSS Vengeance was not just a warship. It was a weapon waiting to wake up. Breaking free. Vroth knew he had little time. He had seen enough wars to know what was coming. Total annihilation. His claws scratched at the cuffs, but they wouldn't budge. He looked around. His weapons were gone. His warriors were dead. He was alone, but he was not weak. The human commander turned away, focused on the ship's systems. A mistake. Vroth acted. With all his strength, he yanked at the cuffs, ignoring the pain. His muscles burned, his bones felt like they would snap. But then, the metal cracked. With a final roar, he broke free. The human turned just as Vroth lunged. Claws met steel. The two warriors collided like titans. The fight for survival. The human was strong. Too strong. His fists moved like hammers, his speed unnatural. Vroth dodged, barely avoiding a blow that would have crushed his skull. He slashed at the human's side, his claws scraping against reinforced armor. Sparks flew, but the human barely reacted. "You cannot win," the human said. "We have evolved beyond you." Vroth's mind raced. He couldn't defeat this thing. Not alone. He needed another way. His eyes darted across the room. Then he saw it, a power console near the wall. If he could overload the ship's core, he could bring this entire nightmare crashing down. But he had to move fast. The final stand. Vroth feinted left, then rolled right. The human swung and missed. In that split second, Vroth sprinted toward the console. His claws flew across the controls, pressing buttons at random. Alarms blared. Red lights flashed. The ship's voice echoed. "Warning. Core destabilization detected. Immediate evacuation required." The human commander's expression finally changed. Shock. "You fool," he growled. "You'll destroy everything." Vroth grinned, his sharp teeth showing. "That's the plan." The human charged, but Vroth was ready. He grabbed a fallen weapon from a dead soldier and fired point-blank. Boom! The shot hit the human in the chest. He staggered, but he did not fall. Vroth's eyes widened. Impossible. The human's armor smoked. His body shook, but he took another step forward. Still alive. But it was too late. The ship's core was going critical. Escape or death. The human warship began to shake violently. Metal groaned. Pipes burst, spewing fire. The ship's AI repeated the same words. System failure. Core meltdown in 60 seconds. Vroth ran. Behind him, the human commander still stood. He didn't chase. He didn't try to stop him. Instead, he simply whispered, "This is not the end." Vroth didn't look back. He sprinted toward the nearest escape pod, diving inside just as the countdown reached 0. Then, boo-oo-oo-oom. The HSS Vengeance exploded in a massive ball of fire, tearing itself apart. Vroth's escape pod spun wildly through space, the shockwave throwing it like a toy. He barely held on as the force ripped apart everything behind him. When the chaos finally settled, Vroth looked out the viewport. The human warship was gone. But deep inside, he knew one thing. This was not over. The humans were back. And this was just the beginning. The escape pod drifted through the darkness of space. Silent, small, alone. Inside, Commander Vroth sat motionless, his claws gripping the cold metal seat. His breathing was heavy, his mind racing. He had faced death before, countless times. But this was different. This was something far worse. The HSS Vengeance was gone, reduced to fire and debris. But the humans were not defeated. Vroth knew that. The last words of the human commander still echoed in his head. "This is not the end." He clenched his jaw. His people needed to hear this. The entire galaxy needed to hear this. The humans had returned, and they were not the same as before. Reaching the Cellary homeworld. Hours passed. The pod systems guided it toward Cellary Prime, the heart of the Empire. As the massive planet came into view, Vroth let out a slow breath. It was still there, still untouched. For now. The pod's distress signal had been picked up. 2 sleek Cellary warships appeared, escorting him to the surface. The landing bay was crowded. Soldiers, officers, high-ranking officials, all waiting, all desperate for answers. As Vroth stepped out, his battered armor and haunted expression made them fall silent. No words were needed. They could see the truth in his eyes. The War Council. Minutes later, Vroth stood in the Imperial War Chamber. Before him sat the High Chancellor, along with the most powerful Cellary leaders. Their faces were cold, skeptical. They had never feared humans before. Vroth slammed his fist onto the table. "You must listen," he growled. "The humans are not the same as before. We thought they were gone. We were wrong." The council members whispered among themselves. Doubt, suspicion, arrogance. One of the generals sneered. "You speak as if they are gods. We crushed them once. We will do it again." Vroth's claws scraped against the table. His voice was low, dangerous. That was not a warship. That was a graveyard, a floating relic filled with warriors who had already died once. The room fell silent. Vroth continued, his voice sharp as a blade. "They do not fight like before. They do not die like before. They have become something else." He turned his burning gaze to the High Chancellor. "If we do nothing, they will come. And when they do, the Cellary Empire will fall." The unseen threat. The High Chancellor studied Vroth carefully. Then he leaned forward. "What proof do you have?" Vroth hesitated. He had no recordings, no physical evidence, only his word. And that was not enough for politicians. One of the council members scoffed. A single ship, that is what you fear. A ship that is now destroyed. Vroth's heart pounded. They didn't understand. They will have more, he said. More ships, more soldiers, more nightmares hidden in the dark. The High Chancellor sighed. We will increase our defenses, but we will not act based on fear alone. Vroth clenched his fists. They were making a mistake. A terrible mistake. A galaxy at risk. As the meeting ended, Vroth stood alone, staring out at the stars. They thought he was overreacting. They thought the war was still over. But deep in his soul, Vroth knew the truth. The real war hadn't even begun. Somewhere, in the cold emptiness of space, the humans were waiting, watching, preparing, and soon, the galaxy would know fear.